The Holy See institutes a vaccine mandate for those visiting the Vatican, and Pope Francis continues to expound on his vision for the worldwide Synod of Bishops. Catholic University professor and columnist Chad PECKNOLD is here with analysis. And the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments in December on Mississippi's abortion ban. What could the implications be for Roe v. Wade? Senior counsel for the Bioethics Defense Fund, DORINDA BORDLEE, will weigh in. Actor, producer, turned director David HENRIE joins us to talk about his new movie, This Is the Year. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. An important show for you tonight. If you'd like to comment, send me a tweet. Nice tweets only, please. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover this evening. Let's get started. The Holy See announced that they are starting October 1st requiring a green pass showing proof of COVID vaccination if one wants to enter the Vatican city-state. The so-called green pass can be issued by the EU or the Vatican to prove full vaccination or a prior recovery from COVID. Entry will also be granted to persons with proof of a negative COVID test within 72 hours. These new measures were issued by the Pontifical Commission of Vatican City-State following a September 7th request by Pope Francis. The Vatican police will be charged with implementing the order. Exceptions will only be made for those participating in liturgical celebrations under the usual COVID prevention measures. And this week, Pope Francis met with 3 Afghanistan refugee families, including a Catholic family and a man whose parents were killed by the Taliban. According to the Catholic news agency, the Afghan Christian man escaped the Taliban after the murder of his parents in 1997. He appealed to the Pope to help another Catholic family that was stranded at the Kabul airport last month. The family went into hiding for 4 days out of fear they would be killed because of their Catholic faith. Italy is offering the family asylum. And Pope Francis continued to make headlines this week, delving deeper into his vision for the upcoming 2023 Worldwide Synod of Bishops, while a Canadian diocese will require vaccinations for everyone attending Mass. Here to discuss all of this is the professor of theology at the Catholic University of America, Chad PECKNOLD. Chad, thanks for being with us. Before we start, some breaking news. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi lashed out at comments made by Archbishop of San Francisco, Salvatore Cordileone, who said that Catholics who support the effort to codify Roe v. Wade are in fact supporting what he calls child sacrifice. Here's Pelosi.
Yeah, I'm Catholic. I come from a pro-life family, not active in that regard, different in their view of a woman's right to choose than I am. In my right to choose, I have 5 children in 6 years and 1 week. And I keep saying to people who say things like that, when you have 5 children in 6 days, 6 years and 1 day, we can talk about what business is of any of us to tell anyone else to do. For us, it was a complete and total blessing, which we enjoy every day of our lives. But it's none of our business how other people choose the size and timing of their families. The Archbishop of the city of that area of San Francisco and I have a disagreement about who should decide this. I believe that God has given us a free will to honor our responsibilities.
Chad, your reaction to those comments, I mean, is this just up to others? There is no operative, objective morality at play here, even for Catholics?
I mean, it's clear that Pelosi is not a Catholic in good standing. She doesn't believe that abortion is murder. She clearly thinks it's like, you know, just choosing a form of birth control, that you just dispense with a human being. is like any other choice that a human being makes, which is absurd. You'd never say, "Hey, I think murder is bad, but whatever you want to do is fine. You have free will." That's absurd. So I think it's not surprising that Pelosi takes this position. Not only is she not in communion with the church on such questions, but she's not even in communion with reality, that we're actually talking about a human being in the womb, that dismissing and dispensing with a human being because you're taking and honoring your responsibilities as a mother, it's just an absurd logic.
Yeah, well, clearly she's on a collision course here with Archbishop Cordileone. We'll see what happens next. I'm sure he'll respond. Chad, this past Saturday, Pope Francis addressed representatives from the Diocese of Rome to speak about that upcoming church-wide synod. Now, he emphasized the 2-year-long synodal process that will involve a, quote, dynamism of mutual listening conducted at all levels of the church involving the whole people of God. Then he added, "It is not about gathering opinions. No, it is to listen to the Holy Spirit and what the Spirit wants for the church, to discover that God is always the God of surprises." Now, Chad, what do you think he means by asking that we be open to discover the God of surprises?
Well, I mean, it's very romantic. It's sort of a romantic idea that really how the church thinks and moves and has its particular style of living and having a mission is that it discerns the Spirit through popular opinion. The church doesn't discern the Spirit through the opinion of the faithful. The church discerns its life and mission through reflection on Scripture, on revealed truths. I'm sort of dismayed that a synod on synodality or class on classes or a seminar on seminars doesn't actually take substance to be something of substance. He talks about synodality as denoting a particular style. The faithful don't need a particular style. They need truth. They need substance. And so I'm very worried about the way in which synodality actually just becomes a political technique for using popular opinion in order to allow liberal elites to say they're listening to the Spirit.
Yeah, well, the Pope keeps saying, and he says it adamantly, we are not gathering opinions, but this synodal process is really about taking surveys, gathering opinions from even non-believers. So it is a kind of an odd process here, because on the one hand he's saying we're not gathering opinions, but we're for 2 years on the local level gathering opinions, aren't we?
It's extraordinary. All these listening persons. You have the listening person in the local church, and how will the listening person collect and curate all of those opinions? And how will those curated opinions be passed up to the national conference? And how will the listening committee at the national conference curate those answers as they're passed to Rome, as they produce the instrumentum laboris? It's this long process of not just collecting opinions, but curating them. And I think this is the problem that is implicit in the whole question of discernment. And discernment's right at the heart of the preparatory documents. And it's clear that Pope Francis means discernment in the kind of Ignatian spirituality sense of discernment. Right? Where for St. Ignatius, it's about discerning the spirits, discerning where the Holy Spirit is leading you, which includes convicting you of sin and leading you into truth. Conversion, basically, is what St. Ignatius means. But the question, I think, for the Synod on Synodality, and especially for the bishops who have an apostolic authority here to conduct the Synod, is does synodality mean what St. Ignatius means by it, conversion, basically? Or does it mean something like a political technique for something like Germany's synodal way, which is radical reform?
Right. We're watching a synodal process that has run into some problems. In fact, even Cardinal Walter Casper has come out and said, do we even see a semblance of Catholicism here? But the Pope went on to say, Chad, that during the synodal process, quote, it may be necessary to leave to change direction, to overcome beliefs that hold back and prevent us from moving and walking together. Now, this is not the first time Pope Francis has said that changes may be necessary and that we need to overcome beliefs that hold back. What beliefs might he be referencing here? What changes?
Well, I mean, I'm just reflecting on when you've lost Cardinal Casper, things aren't going well. I mean, I think that I don't know what he has in mind. I don't know what changes he has in mind. I know the changes I fear are the changes that minority groups are already organizing right now to influence the shape of the Synod. And they're largely trying to influence the shape of the Synod in exactly the way that we're seeing in Germany, in which the aim is social progressivism, to get the church to take on a new style, a particular style. That particular style is the style of the world we live in which, you have an acceptance of civil unions between people of the same sex. You have a sort of liberalizing of many of the church's social teachings, and that is what we cannot have. That's not a synod of substance. That's a synod which is going to die. It's a synod that's not going to stand the test of time. I think about this democratic spirit that conciliarism embodies and that maybe synodality embodies. And I keep thinking about Chesterton's quote about the democracy of the dead. Will this stand up to the democracy of the dead? I hope that we go in the St. Ignatius of Loyola way of discernment for conversion, and not the kind of German way.
During his 40-minute speech, the Pope recalled that the Acts of the Apostles, in the Acts, the Holy Spirit teaches Peter that, quote, God has no favorites and one cannot discriminate in the name of God. We cannot understand Catholicity without referring to the large field hospital which has no borders, end quote. This is a long-time theme of Pope Francis, Chad, but your reaction to its invocation here in the terms of this synodality and this synod on the synod?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, even in the preparatory documents you already mentioned, that it's desiring a greater inclusivity, which including the opinions of people who aren't Catholic. Now, when you're trying to collect the opinions of people who aren't Catholic, they're not going to give you Catholic opinions. And so it seems like this synod of synodality risks being so open that it's actually closed to the mind of the church. And I think that's my great fear here, and my great hope is that we'll have bishops who don't want to manage a process, but who want to be shepherds who are protecting their flock from wolves.
The Pope noted, again, and he's spoken about this often, the rigidity in the church and in the church today. And he says there can be a rigid way of considering things that can mortify the patience of God. Rigidity is a sin against the patience of God. Your thought there? I mean, I guess that would include Ignatius and Chesterton and all the people you've been invoking all day long here, Chad.
Yeah, I don't know what the Holy Father means by rigidity. I mean, I think once again it comes down to style rather than substance, and that worries me. When a certain style is named as a sin, then I don't know what that means. If rigidity means something like I don't know what it means. What does it mean? What's the substance of the claim about rigidity? I don't know what it would mean to call that a sin.
Yeah, no, this is, and look, I've spoken to a number of theologians, of churchmen, of people who've spent their lives in ministry in the church. The imprecision of some of the language here, we're not quite sure what it refers to.
How would you confess that in the confessional? How would you, Father, I've been rigid 3 times. How would you even confess that?
Well, I don't know. I'm as somebody who's done as much as I've done, rigidity's not the problem. It's probably too much flexibility, doing too many things at once. There was a moment in this barely covered address, and again, Chad, we are often the only media outlet that takes these addresses seriously enough, or has the time to actually delve into them, to report them. But when they point to what's coming in this synod, That seems worthy of our eyes, I think. And the Pope referenced a rigid model of the church. Perhaps this will give us clarity. He says, there is much resistance to overcome the image of a church rigidly divided between leaders and subordinates, between those who teach and those who have to learn, forgetting that God likes to overturn positions. Now, what do you make of that, Chad? I mean, the bishops and the priests are supposed to be the teachers and the shepherds here, but what is he trying to help us understand?
Look, here's my fundamental worry is that we had John Paul II and Benedict XVI secure a kind of settlement for how to receive Vatican II, and the desire throughout the last decade or so has been to unsettle that settlement. And the trouble is I never know what the end goal is, because all we're ever asked to do is to be open to unsettlement. For what? For what end? And it's that uncertainty, that ambiguity, the confusion that arises from being asked to move in an unknown direction and to unsettle settled truths that makes, I think, everyone a bit anxious about what the aim and end goal of a synod on synodality really is.
I want to move to something else. There was a transcript of a private meeting Pope Francis had with Jesuits in Slovakia on September 12th. It was published on Tuesday. And during a Q&A session, a Jesuit pointed out that some people want the certainties of the past in their faith. And he asked, what vision of the church can we follow? And Pope Francis responded this way. I'll put it on the screen. You said something very important, which identifies the suffering of the church at this moment, the temptation to go backward. We are suffering this today in the church, the ideology of going backward. It is an ideology that colonizes minds. I think of the work that was done at the Synod on the Family to make it understood that couples in second unions are not already condemned to hell. It frightens us to accompany people with sexual diversity. This is the evil of this moment, namely, to seek the path in rigidity and clericalism, which are two perversions. Okay, Chad, is the church suffering from this ideology of looking backward today? Is that what ails the church?
I mean, in my experience, that's not what young people are searching for, say, when they want a more reverent liturgy. When they want a more reverent liturgy, they're actually reacting against this kind of libertinism, this kind of fluffy 70s, know-nothing, therapeutic kind of liturgy. They're not trying to go back to the past. They're actually rejecting the most recent past. And so whenever I hear that, I think, well, actually the rigidity here, if we can identify rigidity, is this desire to preserve the 70s and 80s. That's the real rigidity here. And
that's an interesting point. Because, you know, the Pope mentioned, following on the quote I just read, he mentioned stopping what he called the automatism of the ancient rite by limiting celebrations of the traditional Latin Mass. But, you know, I thought as I read that, isn't that in some ways going back almost half a century before Benedict and John Paul, who legitimized and allowed greater celebration of the old rite?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of nostalgia for the 70s here. I think bishops should really pay attention to this. You know, maybe rigidity is the right category for discerning the spirits, and that the discernment of spirits should actually entail a little bit of self-criticism by those who actually want to rehash the 70s.
Wow. During this chat with Jesuits, the Pope also called what he labeled gender ideology, and then he added, this has nothing to do with the homosexual issue, though. If there is a homosexual couple, we can do pastoral work with them, move them forward in our encounter with Christ. Chad, your reaction?
I have no idea what to say other than James Martin must be very happy. I think we have to reach out. We have organizations like Courage that helps people reach out. But once again, the question is, what is accompaniment? Is accompaniment and discernment like what it means for St. Ignatius of Loyola, which entails conviction of sin and being led into truth and being converted to holiness, which would completely negate any notion of homosexual action or union? Or does it mean holding hands with sin? And I think if it means holding hands with sin, that's not real discernment of the spirits. That's kind of following the spirit of the age.
Chad, before I let you go, you heard our headline about the Vatican announcing on October 1st all visitors and personnel entering the Vatican city-state will have to show a vaccine passport, proof of vaccination or recovery from COVID within the previous 6 months. Your reaction to this, and what kind of precedent do you think it sets? We're already seeing similar things in the Archdiocese of Moncton in Canada, where they're requiring vaccine passports to go to Mass.
Well, again, it's standard procedure in Europe, and the Vatican's, in a sense, following standard procedures in Europe. The good thing about it is that they are including natural immunity, recovery from COVID, positive tests. So I think in a sense it's less bad. The worry is less access to St. Peter's and more, I think, the Canadian, the diocesan problem is more severe, I think, because there you're actually asking for proof of vaccination to receive the sacraments. And there I just think, Jesus said, I'll only heal the vaccinated? No, the lepers come, and I think this is a huge problem for any ecclesiology that takes the kind of access to the sacraments seriously as something which is a divine gift. We've had priests in the past go to leper colonies. The church goes to leper. We have a tradition of being like Jesus and actually putting ourselves in harm's way in order that people have access to the sacraments. So that a diocese would choose conformity to safetyism and restrict access to the sacraments to only the vaccinated seems to me a betrayal of the gospel.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, we have seen heroic efforts over the last couple of years of clerics, bishops going out of their way to make those sacraments available to people during this pandemic. Having outdoor masses on corners in the streets, bringing the sacrament to people in interesting and innovative ways. That's what the church should be doing, not barring people from coming to the sacraments. On September 26th, very quickly, the Swiss people will vote in a referendum on whether or not there should be, quote, marriage for all. Now, Opus Dei Bishop Joseph Maria Bonamain, the Bishop of Chur, has repeatedly entered into the debate, claiming that he has no objection to same-sex unions. In a recent article, the bishop wrote, "It is, for me, self-evident that other forms of partnership can be oriented toward an enduring love as well. My only concern is, and here I'm neither judging nor dismissing, I plead for maintaining this difference when naming these different marriages." What do you make of that statement?
The corruption of the best is the worst, Raymond. It's a sad statement to me because what it presumes is there's a kind of rearguard acceptance of the spirit of our age, which is absolutely harming human hearts and souls to be led into sin, and that kind of rearguard acquiescence to civil unions, I think is absolutely contrary to what the church teaches about marriage. And as soon as you allow that to be an unresisted claim, a claim which is actually teaching the people something, you've sort of sacrificed your own wisdom, the wisdom that's been given to you by Christ himself. And I think that this is another sort of betrayal that we should also repent of.
Professor Chad PECKNOLD, I thank you for being here. We'll check in with you later.
Great.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
The U.S. Supreme Court has taken on a Mississippi case set to be heard on December 1st. That will directly explore the viability standard set forth in the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. That standard currently permits abortion up until the unborn child can survive outside the womb. How might this case impact Roe v. Wade? Here with analysis of the case and its possible ramifications is Vice President and Senior Counsel for the Bioethics Defense Fund, DORINDA BORDLEE. DORINDA, thanks for being here. This Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case explores the constitutionality of a Mississippi law prohibiting abortion after 15 weeks. Now, the justices pledged to answer on the question stated in their order granting the review, which is, quote, whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortion are unconstitutional. What does that question really mean to personhood, Dorinda?
So thank you for having me, Raymond. What the Supreme Court is actually looking at is whether it should reverse Roe versus Wade. That's what this case is about, to put it plain and simple. What many people don't understand is, what does that mean if Roe is reversed and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which are the two fictional cases that the court came up with these intricate rules. We're talking viability. They acted like a super legislature. You cannot kill the babies after they're viable. Well, when are they viable? That changes depending on medical conditions with progress and so forth. And so this court, which it took quite a long time to put together through the political process and presidential appointments, this court is looking at the question of whether the states should be deciding the policy about how to protect human life, how to protect women, women's health, women from an abortion industry that exploits them, or whether 5 justices should usurp that political process and stop states like Mississippi from passing a reasonable law that says after 15 weeks, this child is now in the 2nd trimester, late-term abortion. It simply says after 15 weeks, it would be criminal on the doctor's part to exploit the woman and kill her baby. None of the women would be subject to prosecution. This is only about an industry that exploits women and their children. So that's what this is about. It's about reversing Roe.
Dorinda, how could the Supreme Court's answer about whether pre-viability prohibitions of abortion are unconstitutional, how would that affect other states seeking restrictive laws on abortion or that want to limit abortions?
So there's a couple of different ways this case could go. It could say, well, we're upholding the Mississippi ban on abortions after 15 weeks because it meets the test of Casey, which means it doesn't put an undue burden on women choosing to terminate their pregnancies, and therefore they just narrowly answer and uphold that one law. However, what the Mississippi Attorney General is arguing is that this case tees up the question at the heart of the issue, which is, should Roe be reversed and we don't have the court imposing these intricate made-up rules and send it back to the states? And so what could very well happen, and it could be a 6-3 decision, it could be a 5-4 decision, but we technically have the votes for the Supreme Court to say, look, this is a procedural issue. Should this question of abortion be in our court? And if they say no, and it goes back to the states, that means that states like Louisiana, where I live, and about 12 or 13 other states that have passed state constitutional amendments to say there's no abortion, there's no tax funding of abortion, that we can have the will of the people expressed to support women, to support alternatives to abortion, and to support unborn children.
Dorinda, will science and what we've learned since 1973, will that at all shape the outcome here? Because it really is a question of viability, and now we have a body of scientific evidence, ultrasounds that demonstrate that clearly.
Yes, you know, as we had in the Louisiana case last year before the Supreme Court, and in cases that we've had throughout the decades, there will be solid scientific evidence submitted in amicus briefs by medical organizations showing what every second grader knows, which is that an individual human life comes into being at the moment of sperm-egg fusion. This is a human being. And the rhetoric of Roe, where the court said, at this stage in our development, we don't know whether this is a human life because there's disagreement amongst religions and philosophers. Well, this is not a religious question. It's a simple matter of biology. This is a human being. States have the power to protect human beings, and they should be able to do so.
In a brief filed in July, the Mississippi Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, argues that Roe v. Wade was, quote, egregiously wrong and should be overturned. The conclusion that abortion is a constitutional right has no basis in text, structure, history, or tradition, she writes. Now, abortion rights supporters argue that the Supreme Court should have dismissed this case, Dorinda, because abortion is already defined as a constitutional right here. Your reaction?
So what the other side, what the abortion industry is arguing is the principle of stare decisis. You've already decided this, court. It was,
Right.
50 years ago, and so you have to stick with it. And so what they're arguing is that an unjust, wrongly decided decision that snubs its nose at our whole political process should take precedence over the Constitution itself. That's not how it works. If that's the case, then we should say that Dred Scott, the decision of the Supreme Court saying that slaves are property, should be upheld, because we had that for many years. Korematsu, where the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court upheld putting in internment camps American citizens of Japanese origin. A plethora of wrongly decided, unjust, gravely immoral decisions cannot, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. That means I have a right to do it wrong. That's not how the Constitution works. And
Right.
I believe that a majority of this court understand that.
During her time on the court, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor made most of the arguments against viability that Mississippi is now arguing. In 1983, O'Connor wrote in the City of Akron versus Akron Center for Reproductive Health. She wrote that viability is a wavering, contingent line, writing, as medical science becomes better able to provide for the separate existence of the fetus, the point of viability is moved further back toward conception. So pre-viability abortion bans have been struck down, Dorinda, as you know, in a dozen states, including your own, and Alabama and Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky. I could go on and on. The question is, could this case topple the abortion precedent of viability as a linchpin for obtaining a legal abortion? And is that at the heart of this case?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's the express question that the Supreme Court set forth to Mississippi, and that probably 50 or 100 amicus briefs, including Bioethics Defense Fund, filed. And so what that means is that in 1973, when Roe came out, a baby was considered viable. Pregnancy is 40 weeks. And at about 24, 25, 26 weeks at that time, a baby, if it came prematurely, could survive outside the womb on its own. Well, with medical technology, that has pushed back, and now we're somewhere probably around 15 or 16 weeks. That's where the 15-week ban came from. Okay, this is pushing back, but the thing is, it's going to continue to push back, and regardless of the point of where that child can live outside the womb on its own, we're dealing with a human being. It's like when I had an open heart surgery, and for a while I was on life support. Did that make me not a human being? No, it made me a human being in need of care, and that's our job as a democracy, is to provide for women who are in vulnerable circumstances, for children. And that's what states are able to do with pregnancy care centers and a whole host of people who are there for women, instead of saying you have to have an abortion and then just destroy your own mind, body, and soul. This is something that we can work with. And no matter what these 5 people say, Raymond, no matter how this case comes out, what this is a challenge to us, especially as Catholics, is to serve one another, to see someone in an unplanned pregnancy as an opportunity for us to be there for them, to pray, to serve, to work. That's how we build a culture of life. We don't have to have 5 justices to do that. We do that.
Yeah. Dorinda, I have about a minute, but very quickly, Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives have advanced a bill, they did it on Tuesday, that would protect the right to abortion. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said Roe v. Wade needs to be codified into federal law. In July, the House passed a spending bill without the Hyde Amendment in it so that the government is spending money on abortions. Will this Women's Protection Act, which is what it's called, become law? And what do you expect from this administration in the days to come?
They will certainly try. I think that because of the Blue Dog Democrats, it probably will not succeed. But I frankly am happy that they are putting this squarely on the table. They are showing their hand. These, this president and this administration and these representatives and senators are showing who they are. And the truth is, they want taxpayer-funded abortion. They want abortion of human beings through all 9 months of pregnancy, and they are out of step with, you know, a majority of Americans. And so they do this at their own political risk, and that's how democracy works. So go ahead and show your hand, and then when elections come around, you let the chips fall.
But before I let you go, there's that Texas case you saw where an abortion doctor in Texas wrote an op-ed that he had violated that law, which prohibited abortions up until a certain point, and it allowed citizens to sue him. Now 2 states have come forward. They have sued him to challenge the law, no doubt. Where do you think this goes?
So, of course, this is the abortion industry who has billions at stake trying to set up a test case. And that's what Roe versus Wade was. They exploited Norma McCorvey, and they set up a case where they can use our tax dollars and at the risk of harming and killing human beings. And so this is just another case, but that question will be moot depending on how this case comes out. And so just to let your viewers know, briefs have been filed. Bioethics Defense Fund has filed a brief in support of Mississippi. I believe that the abortion industry has just about recently filed their cases, and on December 1st, the United States Supreme Court will hear oral arguments. That means that the case will be fully heard, fully briefed, and they will take it under advisement. Usually this court puts out its decisions on controversial things at the end of its session, which is the end of June. So I expect that by the end of June 2022, we'll know what the landscape is, and that could just be a seismic shift in regard to what happened in Texas or in California, Louisiana. All of the laws will be looked at again
affected by this.
However, everything's on the table here.
Dorinda Bordeley, thank you for your analysis, and we'll check in with you as this case proceeds and others. Dorinda's work can be found at the Bioethics Defense Fund at bdfund.org. Thank you, Dorinda.
Thank you, Raymond.
You may know my next guest from big TV hits like How I Met Your Mother and The Wizards of Waverly Place. He's been quite busy during COVID, making his directorial debut with a new film titled This Is the Year. It's out in theaters September 24th. Please welcome David Henry back to the program. David, great to see you. Now, This Is the Year was your first time directing. You co-wrote the screenplay. You're also reunited with your own old screen partner, Selena Gomez. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Tell me about the movie and why you wanted this to be your debut film.
Absolutely, Raymond. First of all, great to be back here with you and hear your voice, my friend, and be here talking to you. It's always it's great to promote something that I'm so passionate about. So, you know, right now, I wanted to, for my directorial debut, I wanted to make a movie that was very much in line with my own sensibilities. I'm an optimistic person. I want to make people feel good. I got into this business entertaining my family when I was a little boy, making movies for them. So I wanted to do that, but on a bigger scale. So my hope with this film was to make something the whole family could sit down together and watch. You could watch with a teen or tween. You wouldn't have to cover their eyes. It would be a bonding experience for the family that would make you feel good and make you feel warm on the inside. So it's a coming-of-age road trip film of a group of kids going to see their favorite band. For the parents, it'll remind them of John Hughes' 80s movies. But for the kids, there's all sorts of relevant messaging there. And at the heart of this, it's about love, but love linked to sacrifice. I always feel like so many times you see love as something maybe fluffy or topical, but is not linked to actually having to sacrifice one's will for the sake of the benefit of another. So you see that manifest in a familial way, in a friendship way, and in a romantic way in the film. And again, but all appropriate for the family to experience and view together. And it was definitely inspired by a lot of the 80s John Hughes movies that I grew up watching. So the parents will feel that. But there's fun things for the kids along the way, and hopefully it'll make you smile and you'll get a good message.
Now, David, you're working with your brother Lorenzo here. Your characters are both competing for the same girl in the movie. Did you cast yourself on purpose? And how difficult is it directing family?
You know, the directing family thing is it turned out to be the biggest blessing, and also the most comedic thing on set at times, because when you're shooting an independent film, the enemy is time. You don't have the money to take all the time you need. So you got to be able to get the actor to give the performance you want and very quickly. And working with my brother, he would give it to me. I would just have to give him a look. A lot of times I wouldn't even need to give him a look. He knew the look was coming, so he knew what he'd have to do because we're brothers. So it ended up being a massive blessing in disguise because we saved a lot of time because we knew each other. We had a shorthand. And then there were the times where we disagreed. And I was like, Lorenzo, I think, we need to do this. And he's like, I just did that, bro. What are you talking about? And then we get into a brother tiff in front of everyone, which in an odd way added a familial quality to the set that made, I think, added a warmth even to the set even more. So it ended up being lots of blessings in disguise. But David, yeah, it was fun.
Just to give the audience a little context, I want to show them a clip of the movie. This is a bit of This Is the Year.
Thank you, officer. I appreciate it. We are all set, completely good to go. Ooh, hi. Nice to meet you guys. I've heard a lot about you. Thank you, by the way, for the ride to front and center. I don't know what I would have done. Appreciate it. Thanks.
This is my Sebastian. sorry, my friend whose name Sebastian. You're not mine.
You think after 12 hours straight together she'd be a little less tongue-tied, huh?
I am not tongue-tied. I just talk a lot.
I think it's cute. I think it's completely adorable. I mean, hey, who knew jail could be like fun?
This film is a contemporary take, as you mentioned, on those classic 80s films. Are we missing those kind of feel-good, coming-of-age plots in movies today that everybody can enjoy together as a family?
I think we really are, and that was one of the major motivations for this, was to really create something that could feel modern, but at the same time timeless, that everyone could come together and watch. I find it very hard to find content. I'm a new parent now. My kids are way too young to watch this movie, although it is PG rated. I can't find anything to watch together where we both can kind of enjoy. It's really hard to find a true co-viewing experience. They're few and far between. I mean, so many things you watch, teen movies, you got to cover your kids' eyes, or it's about something that's very disagreeable from a parental standpoint, that your kids have to sneak without you. It's like, I wanted something that everyone could sit and watch together and really get something out of it that could again make you feel good. So that was a big deal for me. And we definitely bring back the 80s, but we do a lot of things that I think the 80s didn't do. For instance, a lot of the female characters in 80s movies, especially the quote unquote pretty girl, they were just kind of used and abused, and they had no arc. They had no story, really. So in this film, one thing Selena Gomez was she fell in love with in the film is how every character has an arc. Every person starts somewhere and ends somewhere else, especially the female characters, especially the pretty character. She's a complex character with a complex arc, and she comes full circle in the end. So that was a big goal of ours, to kind of update some of the things that the 80s, maybe didn't age very well.
David, teens are overwhelmed with social media and how those platforms make life seem or look easy. This is a big theme in the film, expectation versus reality. Now, being in the public eye, I'll bet you probably know a little about that. I certainly do. Why was that a theme you wanted to work into this film? And how did it become a central thing?
I'm glad you hit on this, Raymond. Coming up in the business, having millions of followers, I meet so many teens, so many tweens, so many young people who are just, I can tell, are inundated at every moment with, social media, TV, film, just like you were saying, that they expect their life to go a certain way. I meet so many young kids who are like, I want to be a famous actor. And I've met thousands of them. And it's like, in reality, not everyone is meant to be a famous actor. You might expect that's the case because that's what's kind of popular, but that's not the reality. And reality is the most beautiful thing ever. So I find my generation of millennials and those younger than me really struggle with this expectation versus reality theme. So I wanted to really chew on that in this film. And I wanted each of the characters to kind of chew on that in a very deep way, because I feel like it's just such a relevant issue that a lot of young people have. And I've just found reality to be the most beautiful thing ever, where you're meant to thrive. So yeah, that was a big goal of mine in the film.
Well, in media, social media or this media, it distorts things, and people take, they take cues or they take biases from the same moment, from the same line. So it's very interesting how the media itself can distort that reality and how people take away their own impressions of it. But here, you and Selena Gomez, your old friend, your old castmate on The Wizards of Waverly Place, you play siblings. She's also an executive producer of the film. What was it like to work again with Selena? And what did you bring to the film that you learned in your Disney days?
Great questions. To work with Selena was a blessing again. We've never worked on anything since Wizards, so this is the first thing we're reuniting on. She knew about the movie. We just know what's going on in each other's lives. I'm very close with her, and she's close with my wife. So she knew about the film. She was always encouraging me, giving me notes and thoughts. But when she saw the first cut, a tear came in her eye and she was choked up and she felt good. And she was like, young people need this positive messaging. She's seen a lot of the other teen movies that are out there. And she's like, they leave me depressed, or they leave me in a place where I might disagree with the heart of the film. So something that is like universal and that can be uplifting. She really liked the message of the film. And like I said, she really identified with the fact that the female characters are layered and have arcs, which a lot of movies don't do, sadly.
You're right.
And what we brought to, in terms of what we brought from our Disney days, Disney is great at making young professionals to be able to know what a set looks like, how it smells, how it feels, to be able to perform and to perform quickly and on time and get it in a couple takes. Disney gives you a professionalism. So to bring other Disney Channel stars in this film, like Greg Sulkin and Jake Short and Vanessa Morano from Switched at Birth, or even Jeff Garland, who was in Wizards of Waverly Place, but from the Goldbergs or Curb Your Enthusiasm. There's such a professionalism, there's such a timing. You were just able to perform very quickly, which gives you more time to get what you really, what will make the film even better. So, we brought that to the table, the professionalism that Disney really teaches you from a very early age.
David, in our final moments, I have to mention a career turning point for you, really a life turning point. In 2015, you appeared in a film, Little Boy, alongside our pal Eduardo Verástegui. You credited that experience with reawakening your Catholic faith that you had grown up in but had lost. How did it reawaken it, and did it change the subsequent career decisions in your life?
It's a great question, Raymond. I mean, I would say absolutely. I met some good men who challenged me. I think a lot of times, we're afraid to push on one another and challenge one another and try to sharpen one another. And I met some good men who were caring and charitable, and they challenged me and they gave me great books to read and said, why do you think the way that you're thinking? Or why, you say this, why do you say that? Just a lot of good why questions that made me think deeper and more philosophically about why we're here and where we came from. And they fed me great books, and they kept in touch and they stayed on it. And we formed authentic friendships, which I always say friendship is like an elevator. It brings you up or it brings you down. They elevated me. And it definitely made me think deeper about what I'm doing and why, and how, at the time I wasn't married or had children, but I was like, what do I want to leave behind for them? And I want to do content that they'll be proud of one day. And I want to make things that can make the world a better place. My company is called Novo, N-O-V-O, because we aim to take a very old approach to story, which is to use story to make sense of the problems of the world and to shape society and shape culture and elevate, and so we want to make that new again. So it definitely had an impactful moment in my life, and subsequent decisions have definitely been altered because of that in a much deeper way. And I'm so happy to make content that can do some good, do some good. Those are always my favorite movies growing up anyway, in books growing up, or, The Lord of the Rings or, things like this, they make you a better person. So yeah,
I agree.
I'm excited about doing it.
Timeless stories with timeless lessons for us as we move, we can pass those on to generations. Now, David, you and your wife, Maria, were married in 2017. Before I go, I want to ask you about a meeting you had with Pope Francis. Your daughter's middle name is Francesca, named in honor of the Holy Father, Pia Filomena
Yes.
Francesca Henry. What happened at that meeting, and what did Francis say to you?
Yeah, I mean, so a little background before that, we had three, I believe it was three miscarriages, and we were really struggling, and we weren't sure what was going on, and we were going to doctors, and there was some surgeries involved, and we were just it was just miscarriage after miscarriage, which was really, really tough on us. And a friend of mine happened to be able to set up a meeting with the Holy Father, and I learned one saying in Italian when I had my time with him, and he came right up to me and looked me in the eye, and he said, I said, Papa Francesco, per piacere, puoi pregare per me, mia moglie, per arriva un bambino. I am Italian, so I do know a bit of Italian, but that means basically just pray for us that we can have a baby. He took my hand, took my wife's hand, combined them, and then he said a special blessing and a prayer over our hands. He put his arms around us, and he said, David, don't worry, you're gonna have a baby, don't worry. And literally 9 months later, we have Pia Filomena Francesca Henry. So the chair is active because that worked, and we're very, very blessed to have our beautiful little daughter and have her name
what a great story.
Named after him.
Okay, I'm almost out of time, but very quickly, you've produced the animated series for Netflix, A Tale Dark and Grim. It's coming out in October, based on the great Adam Gidwitz's books. What drew you to that? I'll have you back to talk about that. But why did you decide to produce that? What drew you to those stories?
Yeah, would love to talk more about it. What drew me to that was just how he was telling Grimm stories in an authentic way. There was so much rich psychological symbolism that the Grimm brothers put into their stories that over the decades centuries were stripped out. I think a lot of people thought, oh, we don't want to do this, it's too scary for kids. But the writer was wonderful because his kind of guiding principle was, it's okay to scare, but not to scar, but scare with purpose. Yep. For instance, if you eat to where you become a gluttonous little child, you could lose reason and become susceptible to a monster like a baker lady trying to cook and eat you.
Right.
So I really responded to the fact that the author put a lot of that rich symbolism back into the world, and he did it again, put a new spin on it too, in a way that felt fresh and relevant and modern, with lots of comedy to kind of counterbalance some of the scare moments.
David Henry, I thank you for being here. This is the Year, directed by David Henry, opens in theaters Friday, September 24th. Check your local listings. Are you streaming it as well, David?
I'm freaking out. It's all over the place. You can see it in theaters, and you can also see it on iTunes, Amazon, and anywhere movies are sold on VOD. This is the Year. Thank you so much, David. Check in with you soon. You're the best, Raymond. Thank you for the time. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. According to the World Watch list issued by the NGO Open Doors International, 1 in 8 Christians will experience high levels of persecution and discrimination every day, and the numbers are increasing. A religious freedom advocate has made it her mission to bring attention to this growing crisis. To talk about her latest project is the president and founder of For the Martyrs, GIA CHACON. Gia, thanks for being here. I want to begin with what led you to establish For the Martyrs Foundation. This inspiration really came from a trip with your grandmother to Egypt, right?
That's correct. In 2017, I traveled for the first time in my adult life to Egypt. And it was actually in Egypt, witnessing firsthand that Christians were willing to lay down their life for Christ, and that Christian persecution was not just something of the past, but that was happening every day in countries throughout the world. And so being surrounded by the Egyptian Christians and hearing their stories of what they suffered for their faith laid a burden on my heart for the persecuted church. And then through the years, I had the opportunity to travel throughout the Middle East, doing work with the persecuted church and the Iraqi and Syrian refugees, and hearing their stories and what they suffered for Christ. I felt the Lord calling me to do something greater for the persecuted church.
Your foundation seeks to raise awareness about the crisis of Christian persecution, but you will also provide aid. How do you do this? Where does the money come from?
Well, we have a strong social media presence, and so a lot of our donors come from online, and we have ongoing projects. Most recently, we were in Armenia after the war. We brought Christmas presents to the persecuted Christians that were now displaced because of the war. But the project that we're most proud of is our March for the Martyrs, which is coming up pretty shortly in Washington, D.C., and where we'll be gathering to stand in solidarity with the persecuted church and bring attention to the crisis of Christian persecution.
We're seeing the numbers of persecuted Christians rising. According to Open Doors International, in 2019, the number of Christians experiencing high levels of persecution was about 245 million. That number is now up to 340 million. You know, we often think about Christian persecution as happening in remote corners of the world. But in the past few years, we've seen attacks on Christians and churches in Europe, in the U.S. Why do you think this is happening? And to what do you attribute the lack of coverage in legacy media?
Well, you hit it right on the nose. I mean, it's undeniable that Christian persecution continues to increase every year. In 2020 alone, we saw a 30% increase in Christian persecution and a 60% increase in the number of Christians killed for their faith. And I believe that the media ignores the crisis of Christian persecution, because to talk about persecution of Christians would mean we would have to answer the question, who is persecuting Christians? And quite frankly, the media thinks it's politically incorrect to talk about Christians suffering at the hands of radical Islamists or communist governments.
At the Standing for Freedom Center last year, you said that pastors and Christians in the West should take a lesson from the persecuted Christians you've encountered. What is that lesson?
It's a lesson of boldness and not willing to back down. You know, Christians in the countries where they're persecuted, when we're looking at the church in China and the church in the Middle East and underground Christians in North Korea, to be Christian means that it's going to cost you everything. And in most cases, it will cost these Christians living in these countries their lives. And so they make the decision to stand for Christ no matter the cost. And we can take a lesson from that here in the United States, where we don't face persecution, but we do face intimidation. And it is so important that now, as Christians in the United States, we're standing bold and standing up to the intimidation that we're facing from the culture.
Gia, I wasn't going to ask you this, but I just saw the story cross the wires a minute ago. The Biden administration is planning on resettling more than 100,000 Afghan refugees in 46 states across the United States. We've seen the effects of this kind of immediate mass immigration in parts of Europe and Sweden. Are you concerned that, A, the vetting of these individuals has not been up to snuff, and that you may have elements who embody just the radical Islamic mindset that you mentioned a moment ago, and that we may be importing persecutors of the church and Christians to our own shores?
We're absolutely concerned. And again, when we are bringing in this number of refugees and the vetting process is honestly not as thorough as it should be, it's very concerning that we're importing individuals that hold to radical ideologies. And we've seen this, for example, in countries like France, where they have a high number of refugees from these Muslim countries, and they have radical ideologies. And we've seen, even in the last 2 years, we've seen beheadings of Christians en masse and radical Islamist attacks in society in these countries.
Yeah. On September 25th, you mentioned this a moment ago, you will be hosting the second annual March for the Martyrs in Washington, D.C. Last year's inaugural march was in Los Angeles. How many people do you expect this year, and what do you want to achieve? What's the point of the march?
We're expecting over 1,000 participants from all different Christian denominations, and we're hoping to send a strong message that Christian persecution will not be forgotten, and that our brothers and sisters who are stranded really in these countries are not abandoned by their brothers and sisters in the United States. We want to send a message to the White House, particularly in this administration, to take action to protect Christian minorities in the countries where they're persecuted, and to not be afraid to call out the countries who are the perpetrators of this persecution.
The second annual March for the Martyrs will take place Saturday, September 25th in Washington, D.C. For more information, you can go to forthemartyrs.com. Thank you, Gia.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.